Everyone, welcome to Timeless Mysteries. Today I've got Andrew from the Unforbidden Truth podcast, and Isabella Young is here as our guest. We're actually streaming today from my channel and Andrew's channel. And if I just got a notification on my phone, I am actually live on my Substack for the first time as well. I just want everyone to welcome Isabella. Hey, how are you today?
I'm looking forward to our conversation. Thank you, Andrew, and thank you, Robert. It's my favorite topic, so thank you for this opportunity.
And Andrew, do you have anything you want to say before we get started?
Yeah, thanks guys for coming out today. I know it's kind of somewhat short notice. I think we've been promoting this for like a week. I released an interview with Isabella a month and a half ago, 2 months ago, maybe at the very most. So if you guys want to circle back after this conversation and listen to that in depth, it's like 3 or 4 videos back, something like that, on Unforbidden Truth. So yeah, thank you, Isabella, for coming out today and speaking with us about cults and survival and all that, and we'll get into it. I'll let Robert take the ropes, and I'll just interject when I feel like it.
All right. So I guess before we dig into your personal experience, I just want to kind of go over the basics of what is a cult. And I think everyone, the public, has an idea of what a cult is, like white clothes and wearing beads and chanting and things like that. One of the first cults that I've researched was the Love Is Real family, and they were from the 70s, and they kind of did dress like that. They a couple people died, and that's how I think they became so well known. There's other cults as well. The Children of God, I think, is one of the ones that people have heard about before. That cult was started by David Berg, and it actually was like a multinational organization, and there was a lot of second generation members. They were born into it. And the big thing with that case was Ricky Rodriguez was abused as a child. He was born into this cult, and then as he got older, he ended up killing the person who abused him before unaliving himself. And the one that kind of got me into actually doing so much research on cults was Larry Ray from the Sarah Lawrence College. He moved in. He was a 50-year-old man. He moved in with his daughter into her dorm room, or into an apartment with her. I think actually it was her dorm room first, and then her and her friends got an apartment with him or something. That is a scary situation, and I think you can watch it on Netflix maybe, or maybe Hulu. But it's this guy. He came out of prison. He told them that he was an ex-Marine. He was in the CIA, and he was in charge of psych ops and stuff like that. And pretty soon he started with the love bombing. He was cooking dinners for them. He was taking on the father role in this household of college kids. And pretty soon he switched tactics until one of them became a sex worker, to pay back this man for things that she didn't even supposedly she broke some of his stuff or something, and she was paying him back, and she had to she became a sex worker to do that. It's just this horrible story. And for me personally, why that story resonated so much is because, I see it as, it sounds kind of like a cult, but it also sounds like a toxic relationship. So if there was like, two people and maybe a couple kids, spousal, like that kind of relationship. And I think there's a lot of similarities. And I actually wrote a paper on my Substack where I actually try to talk about how similar cults are to toxic one-on-one family relationships. And the more that I look into it, the more I end up seeing that there is a lot more differences. And I think the biggest difference is in a regular relationship, there isn't the outside like spiritualness, that type of control, like the like there isn't a spiritual leader, there isn't somebody like that. So in a home, the abuser has no mask when the doors are closed. He's the monster, she's the monster. And then when the doors are open and the people see, then they're the perfect person. That's kind of how I see toxic relationships. But in a cult setting, and this is where I'm going to start asking you some questions, Bella. I think the mask actually stays on even to those closest to the cult leader, the spiritual leader, to some degree. And I think that's like the major difference. What are your thoughts on that?
I completely agree with you that cults can function in a family, in a relationship, and also in a spiritual group, or even a political party, or even a cultural movement. I mean, got the word in it, right? Cult. From my experience, my family was my first cult. My mother was my first cult leader. And as I've come to understand more and more about cults, I can see how what seems to be the underlying like factors when someone rises up to be the leader, or the one who's obeyed. And that seems to be when it comes to individuals, that's like they have a narcissistic personality disorder. And we're becoming so familiar with that word narcissist, it gets thrown around. And that's because that personality disorder is being driven by social media. And so there are, and also by parents who have narcissistic personality disorders, because the research shows that a child who's raised by a narcissistic parent is either going to develop a narcissistic personality disorder or codependent tendencies. And what, in my understanding, they're both rooted in lack of self-love. But there's someone with a narcissistic personality disorder will develop a whole persona, a whole story that they believe is going to get them the attention that they need. Usually it's about power, money, and control, but it's also about just attention. So there's the someone with a narcissistic personality disorder who creates this big story, and then someone with codependent tendencies lacks self-love and then is looking for love outside of self. So looking for approval from other people and getting direction and all that from other people. And that's what I was, that's the wound I had to recognize and then overcome, was lack of self-love, because that made me just vulnerable to cult leaders and being in a cult.
One point I would like to just make is that there is a difference between having the full-blown personality disorder and having narcissistic tendencies. I think when I first, I remember when I first heard about narcissistic personality disorder, it was like in 2003. I was in a college class, and the teacher said how hard it was to diagnose, and how people have, there's no cure for it. If you're a narcissist by nature, you don't, take advice from other people and try to make yourself better, because you're already, you're like better than everyone else. That's narcissistic personality disorder. And I think we just lost Andrew. Hopefully he'll pop back in. But I just want to point it out that, you know, TikTok says you're in a narcissistic relationship if you do all of these things, and they've got a narcissistic personality disorder. They may not have the actual disorder. Everybody, it's human nature, I believe, to have some narcissism. You know, it's natural, but it's how, like, if you're in a room full of doctors and, you know, you think you're the smartest person in the room, and, you know, you're in high school and you're not gifted, you know, that's the narcissism, you know, kind of in a nutshell. You know, you see everyone else as beneath you. And people who, in regular everyday people who have narcissistic personalities, tendencies, though, it's a lot less obvious all the time. So they might, you know, think their opinion matters more, but they may not feel like they actually are the smartest person in the room. I mean, there's like a, you know, kind of a level, like, it kind of varies from person to person. And so I would say, I believe that, like, a cult leader most likely has the full-blown personality disorder, but I can't diagnose somebody else. But I can definitely see all of the, you know, all the
traits.
Yeah, the traits
And the red flags.
And, you know, with children who are raised by a narcissistic personality, person with a narcissistic personality, I won't say disorder, because, you know, they may, you know, on the spectrum of that, they may not actually hit all the criteria to have the disorder. But they usually have a golden child and then the bad child. And that, I think, is a big problem. Those kids grow up and they do, like you said, they either become like the narcissistic controlling person that they grew up with, or they feel, you know, like they want to be better all the time. They want to, you know, get the approval of someone, and they, you know, but in a narcissistic relationship, you never actually get that approval. No matter what you do, you could, you know, like, you could make the best dinner ever, and the narcissistic person in that relationship will tell you, oh, this would have been so much better if you'd have did this, this, and this, and this.
Yeah.
Everybody else in the room, 100 other people, would tell you, oh my God, you have a restaurant of your own. This is fabulous. This is great. But that one opinion, you know, that's the one that stands out. That's the one that sticks in your head. That one person that says, oh, it could have been better like this. And that's where the coercive control comes in, because pretty soon you don't even need them to say those things, and it's already in your head telling you what's wrong with you. And, right. You know, and I mean, I've experienced those things. I know what it feels like to be in that situation, and I can understand. When I think of cults, I can see how the framework works very similar. So I guess I'll just let you chime in, and hopefully we can get Andrew going here.
It's an important point to make that there is a spectrum of narcissism, going from narcissistic tendencies to the full-blown disorder. I agree with that. One of the things that I look for is someone who is further up towards a narcissistic personality disorder, has no empathy. So they can act in ways that they think other people act when they are demonstrating what they think is empathy, but they really don't feel that empathy for another person. And the other thing that they lack is any ability to take a really honest look at themselves. They just won't do that. They won't take any responsibility for anything that happens. They'll just blame and project onto other people and make themselves the victim. So if you're dealing with a person who has no accountability, they're further along in the narcissistic tendencies. They're very devious, because what they're hiding behind is a bottomless pit of self-hatred. They really hate themselves. As much as people want to say they love themselves so much, they like hearing the sound of their own voice and looking at themselves in the mirror, whatever. It's really what they're protecting for this false personality is a bottomless pit of self-love. And that's why nothing will ever satisfy them. Nothing that you do will ever be good enough. They'll always be trying to get what they need from you. And that's a never ending, because they're after what's called narcissistic supply. And that can come from positive attention or negative attention or whatever, but they're going to have a lifelong need for that supply. And they'll just replace one person or one group with another in order to keep that supply going. Once they realize that someone's onto them, they'll discard them and go on to the next person.
Yeah, there's a very interesting aspect of the type of control in a cult situation where they, any, let me see, how do I frame this so I don't sound weird. So there's this control. So there's a spiritual leader, who's got all of these rules that you got to follow. And, when you're following those rules, I'm assuming it must feel good. That's why they keep doing it. But then for some reason, say, they've been isolated from their family, still trying to contact them. The person says, well, maybe I should go speak to my family first. And then it turns into, well, if you do that, then you're failing, in your spiritual obligation here. And they make that normal feeling of, connection with their family as a problem that they're, making. They're the problem. It's not the teachings or the group mentality there. It's them. They're the one that's wrong. And they use that to kind of keep you staying in the center of the group rather than, getting your own ideas and
Right.
maybe going out into the world, getting outside information again. And then eventually you might leave if you do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do know what you mean. And then going even deeper than that, so the cult leader will cut people off from their friends and family so that you just end up in this like sound echo chamber, which is all about how perfect the cult leader is and what a failure of a human being that you are. But what they do is cut an individual off from their own intuition, so that anytime that you get that feeling, oh God, this doesn't feel right, or that was, don't really agree with that, then the overriding thing is, well, I'm the guru. I know you better than you. You need to trust me because, I know the way. And then one capitulates to that, trusting that the guru does know me better than myself and does know the way. And so, well, from my experience, I just overrode my intuition until I was completely lost and disconnected from, higher power or my higher self. And that happens over, day after day after year of being told that what I was thinking or saying or doing wasn't the right thing, that I was such a broken, wounded person that I didn't really know. And so I had to listen and obey.
Yeah. I'm going to go through kind of like a kind of a list of things that I think kind of are common across most cults. And some of these can also apply to a toxic relationship. The love bombing, especially at the beginning when you first meet someone, in a relationship, or you're first becoming, first going to the meetings or whatever, you're greeted with this overwhelming warmth. You're given attention and you feel special. And then, after you've been there for a while, you start losing your outside relationships. They keep cutting you off little by little until you're completely cut off from your family and friends. And any attempt to kind of reconnect with them is, it's reframed as a threat for your personal growth in a cult. I think in a one-on-one relationship, it doesn't have that extra thing to it. But the control mechanism is still that it becomes us versus them.
Mm-hmm.
The group is enlightened, and everyone outside the group isn't. So that's why they don't understand us in this group. Um, if you join the group, I don't know about the group that you joined, but in some of the ones that I've read about, they take on a new identity when they become members. They dress different. They even speak different. They might even have a different diet. And that new them separate is like very like separated from the previous self.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's also the information control. So if you're living in like on a ranch somewhere and you're part of this group, and they might not allow internet, they might not allow you to watch TV, and the only thing you can watch and read is stuff that the group has written, or recorded. They will use your confessions as a weapon. And this can also happen in a one-on-one relationship. You feel guilty about your life, and, it feels good to share that with somebody else. And, at first they will tell you, oh, well, that just means you're normal. It wasn't you, it was them. But then at some point there's a snap where that changes. And then suddenly, everything that you told them is being used against you anytime that you deviate from whatever structure or setup that they want to keep you in. And with a lot of cults, there's also the financial exploitation. They force you to make you pay these things. And if you don't pay them, that prevents you from, growing spiritually or getting into heaven, or, those kinds of things. And then that always moving goalpost. We kind of talked about that a little bit, how you can never get anything like completely right. You never achieve anything to the degree where done it perfectly. Even if it's like 99.9% perfect, the goalpost is going to be, another 5 or 10 feet away. You always got to do a few more things. It's like this mirage that's always off in the distance, but every time you get close, it just gets farther away. And the leader is always above the rules. And I think this also applies in domestic relationships too. The person in charge is always the one who is in control. So what they say about you is like, that points out the flaws, but if it applies to them as well, they don't pay attention to that. The leader is above the rules. And I think with a lot of cults, they use, not just money, they use sex and other things like that, free labor. They demand sacrifice from everyone else, but the leader isn't ever really sacrificing anything. The leader in a cult is usually getting all of this stuff. And then there's that shunning and expulsion as like a theater to prove their doctrine, rather than, like the person might have, had an idea, oh, this is all wrong, I need to get out. But that's more proof. They use that to shun them, and more proof in the doctrine that, is controlling the members. And, the exit cost also is engineered to be catastrophic. And this also applies in a regular one-on-one relationship. It's the reason why an abused family, like a person who's abused in a family setting, can't leave. It's the financial, the housing, all the, you've got to be able to have someone to go to. You have to have, some stability outside of the home that you're in to get out. And it's engineered to make you feel hopeless, like you need your abuser to survive. And I think with cults, it's a little bit I think it's just like it's actually a higher level of that, because if you do leave, then you're also giving up all of the connections you made with all of the members, and they use your exit as more reason for them to stay and reinforce the doctrine they're trying to impose on these people. They reframe doubt as spiritual weakness, I think. And I think the group will always take credit for anything good that happens in your life, and everything bad that happens in your life is your fault. I think that's like the basic kind of like the structure of it, and it's designed to keep people in, and it works, unfortunately.
Yes, check to all those points that you raised about, in my experience, that was what it was like in the cult. I might as well just explain a little bit about it first, then I can talk about the finer points of things. So I met a man who, he was my first husband. We had a fabulous life together. I was 3 months pregnant with our second child when he died suddenly, which just catapulted me into like wanting to die. It was horrible. And so I was extremely vulnerable. Like, I didn't have a family. My dreams of growing old with my partner and all that were just gone. I knew that would never be returned again. So it took a number of years to try and figure out where I was going to live, because we were on a farm, and that was chop wood, carry water situation. And I ended up doing this shamanic journeying course called Dying to Live, which was basically a what do you call it, like a mock death experience, where the death was a guided meditation. And during that experience, I had a huge out-of-body experience, and I was given information by my husband who'd passed away, and that was to go and start training with this individual whose name I've had heard, and I'll just say it one time. His name's Louis Dordompré. He's still running the cult business, but at that time he was what's called a trance channel, which means that he's also a trained actor too. So he was like pretending to be all these different beings, from Yogananda to Buddha to Mother Mary and all that. But then he decided that he was actually all of them, and he was the one. He's the second coming, and the Maitreya, the Kalki avatar, and he's going to save humanity. So he was bringing people in to be his disciples, so he could then have his mission on Earth. And I went over I'm from Australia, and I went over to live in his ashram, which will now only be called the cult, because I thought I was going to an ashram to be with my guru, but that's not what was happening at all. And after a short amount of time, there was this really weird energy between us, and it's not a very attractive man, and he had been living his life as a gay man, but then he turned around and said that he'd healed all his issues, and it was like God's will for us to be married. So I went along with that. I was, like I said, vulnerable. I was looking for a family. I was also looking for a spiritual teacher. So it all dovetailed to this marriage, this family, this community. And I had 2 other children, and they came over to live with us in Laguna Hills in Southern California. And so we were living in a normal home on a cul-de-sac, and there were other homes around in the area where other disciples lived. And people would come to the home every day to basically provide free slave labor, whether that was cooking, cleaning, gardening, walking the dog, or whatever. So the whole cult was just focused on this individual and what he wanted, what he said, what he needed, and everyone was just basically scurrying around trying to fulfill his needs and stay out of his criticism, what's the word, like bad books or whatever you want to call it, because he handed out punishments for people who weren't. doing the right thing. And it was particularly the children, and particularly my children, because the children could see through what was going on way better than many of the adults could. So my son particularly was often writing lines of affirmation like, I'm obedient, I always obey my guru. And I would get lines too like that, like, I'm the wife of Christ, because of course with him being Christ. So anyway, really messed up stuff. So what we had to write lots of lines of affirmation because we weren't obedient or respectful enough. And there was also punishments like sleeping in the garage, sleeping in your car, picking up trash, picking up dog shit. He also punished people, like if someone cooked something that he didn't like, he would make them eat the whole thing. If food went bad, he would make people eat the bad food. Or he used a lot of mind fuckery on people pretty much all day, every day. In addition to the like those points that you were mentioning is what goes on in a cult. There's also the brainwashing and the mind control, and that comes from things like repeating phrases, repeating names. So we had to like chant his name and sing to him and bow to his picture and shit like that. So there was just a small number of people who also were bound to him by tithing. He required that in order to be in his presence, people had to pay 10% of their gross income, or any gifts or donations or inheritances. 10% had to go to him. And that's how he funds his lifestyle. And so that's, he's also he's also a thief of money and time. And then the big part for him is that he has a sex addiction. So we had sex one time and conceived my daughter. This was another psychological operations, or psyops, things that I've come to understand. They get played out on humanity, but in the cult, he would do these mind games with people all the time. And he announced that the baby that I was carrying was actually an incarnation of Lord Ganesha, who's from the Hindu pantheon, the remover of obstacles, and she was going to come and help me get closer to God because I was so stubborn and such a bad student. So that psyop was going on. That really messed with all the children, because then she was deified and they were supposed to be worshipping her, and he would tell the children that I loved them differently, which really has messed up our relationships pretty much. It continues on because of the games that he played with the kids. And what was I going to say? Oh, that's right. So I took on a different name. Like you said, they require people, they sort of you get redefined with a name. So I had a new name, and I changed that after I left the cult. I just didn't want to have any of that energy with me at all. And then I'll just skip through. Every day is like whatever he needs, what he wants to eat, where he wants to go. Everyone's got to make sure the car doors are open and the mats are laid out. There's flowers for the pillow when he where he puts his feet in the lounge room, because he had his big chair with a photo above it and all that. And then one of the things that we did a lot was what I've heard, this guy called Mark Vincente, he's been exposing the Nexium cult and also Bentinho Massaro, and he explains this thing that it's called distortion sessions. So it's everyone sits around and you basically, like you were saying, you get those things that you feel ashamed about or embarrassed about, they will get dragged up and out for everyone to see until each individual is basically just like shredded and in tears and writhing on the floor and an absolute mess. So we have distortion sessions all the time, whether it was like a bird flew into the window and then it's, well, what did you do? What is it in you that caused this bird to fly in the window? So like you said, all the good things are attributed to the cult leader, and anything else is to do with what a broken shell of a human being each of the cult members are, because cult members are usually genuinely very good people. They have good intentions. They do want to be part of the community. They do want to make a difference. They do want to help, but somewhere within them there's some wounding, and so that they get like sucked into this mind game. And just to fast forward, been in the cult for 7 years. My son came home from school one day. He was very upset and didn't want to talk about it. So I said, why don't you sleep on it? We'll talk about it in the morning. And in the morning he was gone, which was really unusual for him. And we called all around to his friends and no one had seen him. And the next day, the cult leader sent his assistant to look at the hill behind our house. It was where these big power lines went through. And he found my son, who had a neck wound. He was dead. He had a neck wound, and that was framed as a suicide because the cult leader said my son found out he was gay, and that was unacceptable to him, and he knew that was unacceptable to me, so he took his life. And all of that was just heinous lies. And that murder, it's a murder. I'm supposed to say allegedly, but that my son's murder is what snapped me out of the cult programming. And it took a while. It didn't happen overnight, but I went along to see this counselor who'd been part of the cult group, because not only did we have to spend all this time and money on our own personal development, we had to go and see, I never did because I was so disobedient. There was a kinesiologist and a counselor who were there to support us because we're so messed up. Anyway, I went to see him after my son's murder, and he said to me, you know you're in a cult, don't you? And I said, no, I thought I was in an ashram with my guru. And he said, go home and Google cult characteristics. And I did. And that list that you just gave came up. So I went through all the different, line items, and each one was like check, charismatic leader, who's the arbitrator of truth, the love bombing, which is followed by hate bombing. I went from being the wife of Christ to the Antichrist. And then there's like I said, the mind control, brainwashing, financial control, control of sleep, control of food, because when you're sleep deprived and don't have enough nutrition, the brain doesn't function properly. So people are more easily manipulated. Plus our time was taken up by whatever he wanted. Like he would just hand out tasks all the time just to keep people busy. So you really didn't have any time to think for yourself. And also, like you said, information was restricted. We were not supposed to be reading any other books than the ones he recommended, which were usually about other cult leaders who were proclaiming to be the second coming, because there are a lot of them. There are a lot of nut jobs out there who get that idea about themselves. So we had that information control. And then once I had looked through that checklist, I realized, oh my God, I am in a cult. And I just want to say here that if I hadn't had that individual say to me, you're in a cult, I don't know how long it would have taken me to get out. And I know some cult professionals say don't tell people they're in a cult because they'll be driven further into the cult and it may cut off their relationship with you. I disagree with that. I think there's a way to present the information. Like I think my family knew I was in a cult. A year after I left Australia, they went to a cult expert, but no one ever said anything to me. Like no one ever pulled me aside and said, hey, you know you're in a cult, until this guy did after my son was murdered. So I think there's a way to present that information to people. So, I mean, if I'd been presented with photos of him, because like I said, he had a sex addiction. So we had sex one time and he never touched me again for the whole entire marriage. And he'd always blame that on me. Like I was too much like a man. I was too needy. I was undeserving. Like I didn't deserve his touch or whatever. And then the end of it that just like shut me up was that being celibate was for my highest and best. So then he didn't have to listen to my complaints anymore. And so he was not celibate. In fact, he was having sex with a lot of the men in the cult, raping them, mind raping them and raping them. And he was also on Tinder and Grindr and all that. And so if that information had been presented to me, whether it was photos, bank statements to show how he'd been siphoning off money for himself, also like whether it was a letter or some information from ex-cult members, because there were people who'd come and gone, but what happens, like you said, when people leave the cult, it's not an easy thing to do, and the people who leave are shunned by those in the group. They're also labeled as being demonic, as being weak, and they've lost their way. They just couldn't handle it, so that's why they left. And in addition to that, so for me getting out, I had to overcome that mind fuckery that gone on. But what he did with me was blackmailed me with our child. Like he said, I couldn't leave because he wouldn't let me take her, and also I didn't want to stay in the States, so I was kind of bound in that way. But on the like the soul level, what he did was he said that and this is what apparently he said to a lot of people, like, it took you thousands of lifetimes to find me, tens of thousands of lifetimes. Like, you crawled across a football field of broken glass to get to me. And if you turn your back on me now and walk away from this, then you're turning your back on your life, yourself, on God, on, your purpose, on your soul. And that was probably the most difficult thing for me, was to just go, I don't really, it doesn't matter anymore. I just have to get out because this is hell. So I left. I didn't really have the support of my family, but I knew I had to get out to save my own life and my children's life, because my death wish was so high at that point. And so I escaped to Hawaii, and that's where I've been living ever since, and learning about cults, learning about myself. Like, I understand now that I had codependent tendencies and that I had to heal my lack of self-love, and that's still a work in progress. And now I'm understanding more. Even now, like 18 years later, I'm still learning about the evil ways of cult leaders, and how cults operate from in a couple, in a family, in a group, and then in terms of on a global scale. That's what I've been learning about. So that's my summary of my cult experience.
It sounds terrible. I realize that when you're in it, you just can't see it, and I don't think you can blame somebody for that. You wouldn't know. I mean, you just can't know until you take. I mean, it took one person to mention it to you. I can see how that could potentially drive somebody further in, because when somebody attacks your belief, I think most people would probably defend themselves, defend their beliefs. I think much harder if they're in a situation where they're actually being controlled all the time. Luckily for you, there was other circumstances at the same time that, kind of helped you see that you were in a cult. I mean, I can't imagine it. Molly asked, can anybody be brainwashed? And the answer is yes. And some of the most, I'm trying to find it here. I found out that there are people, like actual doctors with PhDs, who study cult behaviors and stuff, and they actually get pulled into the cult, knowing all of the warning signs, knowing all of the red flags, knowing that everything's going to feel great at the beginning, and then you're going to get cut off from everything, and then it's not going to be that way, and they still fall for it. And it's the way that an emotional person can be exploited by these narcissists. You can call them, I mean, if you look at the cluster B psychological disorders, they're all kind of different, but they're all kind of the same. The sociopath, the psychopath, the narcissist, all of those things are very similar, and they all have this lack of empathy, and they can have I think I call it like cognitive empathy, where they, like an AI, can understand empathy, but it can't actually feel it. I think that's what a real psychopath is like. They can fully understand what empathy looks like, how it, saying one thing is going to make somebody react a certain way, and they use it for their own evil ways. That's a covert narcissist, I think. Also, some of the terms get kind of blur together. But I'm trying to find the name of the person. Uh,
That's such
and
a good analogy between how AI appears to be sentient and all, but it's not. And it's exactly the same as how someone with a narcissistic personality disorder appears to be human, but they're not. They're
yeah,
actually they are run by they do have demonic possession. They do. They have a dark side that runs the show,
yeah,
and that's.
I
I
I
know you
kind of
don't.
I kind of tend to, like, with the demonic stuff. I mean, I get it. I won't I won't say it. I won't like bash your beliefs or anything, but I just want to point out that a person without these feelings can be very smart and understand what they're supposed to feel,
Mhm.
and use that against people who do feel. And if it is demonic possession, I mean, it could be, there could be some outside influences, that we can't see, that 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 make this happen. It could also be just bad, you know, internal wiring. When you're being conceived and your cells are all forming, something gets, kind of put out of whack. I mean, for me, in my personal belief system, it's more like, you know, I I won't deny pretty much anything, but I'm open to the idea that I don't understand it, and I don't necessarily need to understand it, because I don't think I'm capable of understanding it. And that's kind of where I live, in that weird gray area there. But there was I was trying to find the name of somebody who was Jim Jones. No, wait. Well, I'll get into that. But there was Stephen Hassan. Stephen Hassan. He was 19 years old back in the 70s. He was a poetry major at Queen College. He was recruited into the Unification Church. You probably heard of them, the Moonies.
Mhm.
It's kind of a famous cult. He joined after a bad breakup. You know, and it's um, hey, Andrew, I see you're back. I know you're having issues. I'm not trying to ignore you. I just don't have time to troubleshoot all this stuff. I've seen the text, and I mean, I got you added, but now there's a echo.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but
Okay,
I can also
good.
hear me now.
Oh, sorry. I'll mute when I'm not talking then. My bad. Yeah, I've been trying to mess with this for like 45 minutes now.
I know, and I've seen the text. I'm really sorry. I'm just trying to, like, you know, uh, continue the conversation. But where was I? Oh yeah, the Stephen Hassan. This is an example of somebody who got away from a cult, but he joined after a bad breakup, so he's in an emotional state. He's an easy target. He's looking for something to make him feel good, and you know. So he ends up quitting school. He gives up his bank account. He's inside this cult, like totally immersed in this cult for 2 years, and finally his family breaks him out, um, and they actually have to have him deprogrammed, and now he has a PhD, and he is one of the leading cult deprogramming experts in the country. He created this model. Oh shoot, Byte, uh, behavior, information, thought, and emotion. That's what it stands for. Behavior, information, thought, and emotion. He's got it's something you should look up if you haven't looked it up ever, if you've never heard of him. It's really interesting. And, I mean, yeah, sorry, I kind of lost my train of thought there. I had a big plan for that information, but another thing I want to bring up before I forget was David Koresh. I think we all know who he was, the Waco, Texas guy, but he started out as a member, and then he tried to take over, and he got kicked out, and then he took 25 followers with him, and then he grew his own thing, and then he goes back there and actually takes over the whole thing. And there's just so much interesting stuff. But I did have a plan for talking about Mr. Hassan, but I forgot. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I wanted to go back to the can anyone be brainwashed question. And I think, and the answer is yes. But first in order to not be brainwashed, it's important to firstly know yourself and know that you know yourself better than anyone else. And then recognize that if you are in a vulnerable state, like you were saying, this guy had a bad breakup, I had the death of my partner. So when you're in a vulnerable state like that, then you are more susceptible to being brainwashed. And then recognize that what sort of tools and techniques are being used, because as humans, we are subjected to all kinds of brainwashing tools and technologies. I don't know if you've heard of MK Ultra. It's a CIA brainwashing program that actually affects all of us. It's not just, isolated incidences. It's actually goes on all the time, because these electronic devices that we use and think they're just for entertainment or communication, they are brainwashing tools. The television, these screens, the phones and all that, they are programming our mind. And that's not just with the information that comes through them, but that's the vibrations, the lights, they all are frequencies that are designed to brainwash us. And the way to stay clear-minded is to be aware of the ways that we are being manipulated, because you can just see it like through the mainstream media, just the repetitions of lies that increase fear and terror, because when you're fearful, then you're not thinking clearly and you're more likely to be manipulated. So just be aware that mainstream news is government propaganda that's just there not to give you truth, but just to mind fuck you, basically. So when you're aware of all the ways that we are being brainwashed, then you can be protected and be aware. Because we just touched on it a little while ago, how I didn't know that I was in a cult. Unless you are like aware of that there is brainwashing going on, or mind control, or that's actually what's affecting you, what's not allowing your perception of reality to expand anymore, because we only perceive like a tiny fraction of reality through our, as we are through our five senses. There's a whole lot more going on than that. And when that perception is controlled and manipulated, then that's, that means we're in a cult. But when we can expand our perception and continue to see what, the bigger picture, what's going on behind closed doors or in the shadows or whatever, then we can avoid being mind controlled or brainwashed.
I agree. And when we talked the other day, before this, I mentioned my time in the Philippines, and I realized there's when you live, that's actually a third world country, right? And when you go there, there's going to be you're just not going to be. It's going to be weird. The power lines are all scattered all across. They've got lines that should have been taken down that are still up there. It just looks like danger everywhere. There's no stoplights. There's 500,000 cars on the same road, and there's no car crashes though. And then you get into your house, there's no air conditioner and it's 95 degrees outside. And then, there's also no hot water. We're told we need hot water to clean the dishes, things like that. And after a few months of being there, I got used to everything, and I realized that there's so much that we're taught living in the United States anyway, that these are the normal things, these are your basic necessities. You have to have this and that. I had like 3 or 4 days with no electricity, period, just because the power went out. They would turn off the water at least once a week for a whole day. We wouldn't have running water. It was just different, and I'm glad I got to experience that. There's just, I think with the brainwashing, what I see is all the advertisements.
You're right. Yeah.
The advertisements is the real brainwashing. And when I stopped watching cable TV before everybody did, they called it cable cutting. I didn't have to watch commercials anymore, and now they got commercials like popping up on every web page you open up, and now you're still getting them some way or another. But yeah.
I was just going to say how we are brainwashed to believe that we need this or need that, to survive. I was driving past a laundromat this morning, and that those chemicals that come from the artificial perfumes in laundry detergents, a lot of other things too, with perfumes and stuff, they really do create brain damage. And that's another ways that we are mind controlled. There's so many products and all the EMFs and all that really do affect our mind, our consciousness. So driving past a laundromat and realizing that most people don't think their clothes are clean unless they smell like Tide laundry detergent, and where it's actually really very dangerous neurotoxin. And that there's so endless examples of ways in which we're convinced that something is good for us where it's actually a poison. And that's very true of a lot of what comes from the pharmaceutical companies, for example.
The big Ozempic craze right now.
God.
The funny thing is, I was writing this fiction story based off of this drug. I went to my chiropractor, right? And he was telling me, "Oh my God, I just read all this stuff on Ozempic. It's actually it's not just like getting rid of people's hunger. It's getting rid of people's addictions, like gambling problems, or like decreasing on this drug. And like, if you're addicted to watching TV, people are watching less TV, all of these things." And I started writing this fiction, like apocalypse, like dystopian future thing based off of this drug. And then one of my friends was like, "Hey, that sounds like the movie. I forget the name of it now, but I watched it in the 90s. And they had this drug that everybody had to take once a week. And it got rid of their emotions, basically, so they could focus, and then it would prevent wars and stuff." So I stopped writing it, but there's some really bizarre side effects of Ozempic, and it's not just weight loss. It does quash your appetite, or makes you nauseous, so you don't want to eat or something, but it's doing other things as well.
Wow.
And it's kind of scary.
It is. It is scary, especially how many people are on board.
Yeah. As far as like, the pharmaceuticals goes, we wouldn't know we were like giving our self-medication that would be controlling us somehow. But if they could figure it out how to do it, I'm sure they would. We would all be, slaves like in Egypt building pyramids.
And now we're just debt slaves building empires for psychopaths.
Yeah. So Isabella, before you got like into this group, what were you doing before that? Were you already like on your own spiritual journey, trying to figure out things?
I was raised by a militant atheist. My mother hated God and anyone who believed in God. She looked upon as a lesser human being. So I grew up with this like superior attitude to other people who believed in God. They were foolish. And it wasn't until I met my first husband and we started, he gave me some books to read. He was a very wise man. He was a spiritual warrior and he was an actual warrior. He did 4 tours of Vietnam. He had a spiritual awakening and he was, he was a good person for me to meet to break me out of my atheism. And so we used to do meditation together and we did Tantra workshops and we did some shamanic journeying together. And so I was really just starting to go down a spiritual path, which for me is just realizing that there's more to life than that can be perceived through the 5 senses. That's what a spiritual path means to me, that I understand there's a non-physical reality that affects this reality. In fact, there are lots of non-physical realities. There are non-physical beings, and there's a lot going on that we really cannot perceive through our senses. So that I had just started on that journey. We were both working in the fields of outdoor education. We were teaching climbing and rock climbing and skiing, cross-country skiing and paddling and hiking and stuff like that. So he was working in the corporate area using outdoor adventure activities with companies for team building, and it was also really personal development. And I was working in the mental health field with young people who'd had their first psychiatric diagnosis, whether that was schizophrenia or manic depression or whatever. And we created this 6-month program for young people to come on and participate in the activities. So for instance, we'd start off with a half-day walk, then a whole-day walk, and eventually leading up to a 5-day overnight walk, carrying packs, cooking food and all that. Then this was to increase self-esteem and also just social skills and practical skills. A really powerful medium, actually. And that program's still going. And so our life was looking good. We're living on a farm. I wanted to be self-sufficient as possible. I was really into permaculture and biodynamic gardening. And we had fruit trees and chickens and goats. And I'm realizing now that was the time where I got to actually live my dream for my life. I thought that I was working towards that, but actually what's happened is those things that I really held dear to my heart, I have got to experience. It just wasn't, for longer and wasn't in the end. So before the cult, I was living what I would consider a really, my dream.
So when you first met this guy, and I mean, was it actually a cult then, or was it just like just basically one person joined? I mean, how many people's in this group now? I know the website's active, and I mean, it looks like, I mean, if you just look at his website, it looks like there's red flags everywhere to me. But I mean, he's obviously still recruiting. He's had members there. I mean, but it also, when you were kind of describing it, it almost sounded like it was just at a regular house there for a while. Am I wrong or?
No, you're right. I think the first thing is no one actually joins a cult. One joins a group that may evolve into a cult or already be operating as a cult. And I think it was a cult from this group that I was in was already a cult. None of us knew. Even though we were joking about it being a cult, it was like, oh yeah, we're the cult that's not a cult type of thing. So that word was mentioned, but it appears as he's a spiritual teacher and he has a group of disciples. I do not know the number now, and it was never a very big organization, which is an interesting thing about this particular cult, because he's been running for a lot, running the cult business for decades now. And he hasn't really had to expand out like some of these big other cult leaders where they get thousands of members and lots of courses and people throwing money at them. He stayed under the wire with just a small number of people who've been paying him for years now, and that's kept him under the wire, and it kept his head out of the gunfire. And also the really big thing about this cult was, and I know it takes a lot of time for people to start to talk about their experience. Like it's just been the last couple of years that I've been able to speak about what happened. But people from this cult got so mind fucked, and the men got raped, that they are just not willing to speak about their experience. They just either want to, just move on. But there aren't other people really calling him out, or I'm the whistleblower at the moment. And that's an important thing, because when what happens is there's the exposure of the cult leader starts with one whistleblower, and then other people will join in and tell their stories. Because what's important about, it's not going to be my life mission, but I'm just going to chip away at it. But he needs to be exposed, because there are suspicious deaths associated with his cult besides my son's. There have been a number of other people in the cult who have suicided and been taken out as a result of being associated with him. So they're dangerous. They're dangerous and they're evil.
Molly asks, do the members live together? I'm also curious about that. Or is it just like they meet at a location, or do they actually live together?
So they live together in group homes, and that's used as a tool of growth and whatever. So he puts people who usually don't get along very well in the homes together, or in rooms together, or even he marries people too. So, his thing is that everything that he does is for other people's benefit. So he can do no wrong. So whether he's out grooming young boys or whatever he's doing, that's all for everyone's benefit. And there are people that live in the group homes who are under his immediate everyday instruction, and then there are people who are in a more of an extended community that come along for group events, whether that's devotional singing or cleaning his house from floor to ceiling once a week or whatever. So yeah, they do live together, and that's, like I said, seen as a tool for spiritual growth.
Miss Olga asks, is food restricted? And I'll add to that. I mean, is there a specific diet that you're forced to change to? Could be vegetarian or something like that. I mean, I don't know for sure any of that yet, so I'm kind of curious myself.
So the cult, for all the years I was in it, was required to be vegan, although the cult leader would go out and eat whatever he wanted. He just didn't bring any of the leftover food back to the home if it had meat or whatever in it. So he's just a walking hypocrite, really. So yeah, diet was restricted. Obviously, no alcohol or drugs, even weed. Not that that's a drug. It wasn't viewed as a medicine. It wasn't restricted in the amount you could eat. It was just the type of food that you could eat.
But if, say, somebody did something to offend the leader, would he take away, your right to eat? You have to miss this meal or something like that?
Oh, that's just reminding me. So he made my son eat his food out of a dog bowl because of the way my son was speaking to him. So yeah, food was used as a punishment. Like I said, he made someone eat the food that had sat at the back of the fridge and was going off. Someone hadn't taken care of the leftovers, so they had to eat that. If people brought back unripe fruit from the supermarket, he would make people eat that. Yeah, food was used as a method of control and punishment.
When I listened to the podcast on Unforbidden Truth, I think I remember hearing something about the FBI wasn't investigating this group, and um, I think you just mentioned something about money. Is that what triggers the FBI? Is like when certain like large amounts of money? I mean, how does I
How
don't
does
know
the
how
FBI work?
yeah.
I
I mean,
don't know.
how do they get in interested in these groups? And I mean, when is it enough that they have?
Right.
I mean, you know what I
When is it
mean?
enough? I think
Yeah.
that I've just looked at how the FBI gets involved in other cults and then ends up with the cult leader facing criminal charges, whether it's for money laundering or uh, raping children. So I have contacted the FBI and wrote a letter to them about the cult leader and the one in Australia, his cult leader in Australia, being involved in international child sex trafficking, because the cult leader in Melbourne, just an evil piece of work, adopted her two nephews, who were then groomed from about age 7, convinced that they were gay, and they were sent to his room whenever they were on retreat in Australia. And um, yeah, sexual abuse took place. Oh, it's just awful. It's just awful. Sorry, I forgot. That's just such a horrible thing to speak about. So anyway, I wrote to the FBI and told them that these boys were being flown over to America because it's supposed to be a great honor when you go to stay with Guruji. You're serving him. You're there. You're in close proximity to him. This is like the highest honor. And those young boys were sent over to America for him. But the FBI didn't. They don't respond to any emails, but they did get the information. I also reported him to the IRS for tax evasion because he was able to wrangle a 501c3, so he doesn't pay taxes. He says it's an educational institution, but it's not. It's just a front for a very sick, evil individual to get his needs met, to get the sex, money, and the power that he needs. So I don't know if they're ever going to do anything. I don't know what would be like the trigger point. Maybe another death.
Yeah. Maybe more evidence of
Maybe more people speaking up.
mhm. Yeah, I mean, I know that the FBI does get involved in these things, but I'm assuming, I guess now that I think about it, they would have to be more evidence of some type of crime, and
Yes.
you know, it not just not just
Basis.
circumstantial, but
Yeah.
actual proof of
Right.
something, or you know, I don't know. I'm guessing if what you're saying, it sounds like eventually they probably will investigate him. The one thing about his like website is it looks normal. You know, he says these things that kind of remind me of the documentary I watched called The Secret on Netflix years ago about, you know, but he calls it victim consciousness, right? Or something. And I think it's like an inverted version of The Secret because I don't know. It doesn't sound right. I think any psychologist, any counselor would, you know, tell you you don't have to blame yourself for these things because it does cause more problems in long term. And I think I don't know. I try not to read too much into it because you know I don't want to get sucked in, obviously.
Yeah, I
Because
would advise anyone listening, don't go and look at the website. They do use they're dark magicians, so you've got to be really careful around what they present because it isn't. It's lies and manipulations. And he what's like picks and chooses from different types of like New Age stuff or Hindu stuff or whatever it is to make up um, his teachings.
Yeah, I did notice that too. Some of it does sound like other things I've heard before, but I don't know. There is a lot of red flags just in the like his like about us page that just screams don't this group to be. But
It
I mean,
screams run.
yeah. Um, I don't know. When I was a kid, when we'd go to like the airport, there'd be people like passing out flowers. I was always told not to talk to those people. They're trying to get you into a cult. I think they were probably Buddhist monks, and I don't think they were actually trying to get you into a cult. But that's my earliest like memory of talking about a cult. you know, Seeing stuff like that.
Right.
Uh, So
Yeah.
if you're a young person, because young people are the typical people who get recruited first, I think that's like the target is like the average age is 25. But if you are like, you know, looking for spiritual like goodness in your life and you're open to these ideas, how do you make sure that you're not picking the wrong one? You know what I mean? Like how
Yeah.
how can you how can you feel safe exploring these things when there's so many bad ones out there that are going to exploit you?
Right. Well, I think that for me, the most important thing is to be in touch and connected to your intuition. Just understand that you get gut feelings, you get like chicken skin, you get a sickening feeling, you might get a tightening in your throat, or you get like pain in your head, or whatever it is. It's important to understand how the field, or the eat from the Godhead or whatever, that speaks to us, communicates to us through our body, through our heart. Sometimes I can feel my heart like tensing or fluttering or whatever it is. So it's important to understand how information is communicated to the self from the higher self, and then listen to that. So if you just went on that website and you got all red flags, and you have to listen to that, like, don't think, oh, well, maybe it'll be all right. No, just listen to what your intuition is saying and follow that that feeling. That's what I would do. That's what I do now. Like, if something doesn't feel right, if I'm watching a video and it doesn't, I won't even listen to it anymore. It's just like, no, I don't need that information. Whereas other times I might feel that I'm guided to watch some video or read a particular book or whatever. So for me, it's been a process, and this was part of my healing process, was to learn to trust that the information that's coming to me, and then listen and then follow the instructions, because the intuition, the guidance from higher self will never lead you astray. But if you allow someone else's opinion, or whatever mindset, worldview, to interfere with what you know or you feel is right for you, then that's how you can get led astray, by listening to other people.
Yeah.
And I just also, just while I remember, I wanted to just emphasize that cults is, yes, okay, there's spiritual cults that's centered around a particular individual who believes that there's someone who they're not, and everyone's like following along. But there are also movements in our society that function like cults. And I'm just going to say what they are. There are more than this, but I'll just use two examples. So there's the transgender movement, and there's also the parental estrangement movement. And that's where adult children are choosing to turn their backs on their parents. And there are parents who are toxic and probably best disengaged from. But it's now becoming like an epidemic of young people who are choosing to become orphans. And they say they're really supported online. Yeah, you're so courageous for taking this step for your growth and healing. And yes, okay, there might be time for that, but what that's doing, it's now separating like families, and so that whole circle of life gets broken. There's now not that cycle where young people are taking care of older people, where young people are receiving advice from older people, and it's a cult. And when you're in a group or whatever it is, or a movement that really doesn't allow you to be thinking for yourself, And then if you leave that group, then you're not allowed back in. You're less of a person. You're weak-minded or whatever. So I just want to emphasize that, to be aware that there are these movements that can take a hold of people that function like cults, that aren't necessarily led by one person, but it's good to be aware of them too. It happens in politics, sports, all that sort of thing.
One thing that kind of stands out about what you just, when you mentioned the kids, breaking away from their family, even if it wasn't a movement, like that's like step one of joining a cult already,
Right.
because you just disconnected from your, your outside source. So you're out there in the world by yourself. Now you've, disengaged from your family life, and that makes you more susceptible to getting sucked into one of these kind of organizations.
Right, exactly. Because this happened to me with my daughters. They've chosen to live their lives without me, and their criticism is that I joined a cult, and the irony is that they're now part of this parental abandonment or estrangement cult. And this is something that I've been learning about too, because it's just happened to me. I thought I was alone. I thought, oh, no wonder I'm such a fucked up parent, failed as a mother. So of course they're going to, not want to have anything to do with me. But I'm realizing that and learning that it's another social movement that's breaking down the fabric of society, and actually like rotting our society from the inside out, because these are important bonds that need to be strengthened, and we need to be able to work through conflict. It's human relationships to have differences of opinions, but if the solution is to walk away and shut the door and never have any like bridge for repair, then we're really heading down a very dark road, because it does take work to keep human bonds strong, to keep communication clear, and to take responsibility, and be able to forgive, be able to offer apologies, and be able to make amends, and then move forward from that. So it's actually creating a whole slew of people who don't know how to resolve conflict, don't know how to heal relationships, and don't know how to work through the hard times. It's like, what sort of civilization are we going to create?
Yeah, I think there's some of that is kind of normal. 20 somethings always leave home, but hopefully they come back. Hopefully they learn what they need to learn and come back. Uh, I I mean, I don't know your personal situation, but I mean, there's always that hope, right? That they will come.
Yeah, there's always hope.
They
It's just a very powerful and growing cult at the moment. And like I said, those people who are choosing to walk away from their parents have huge amounts of support online, and they're given a lot of positive feedback. Whereas any parent, like if I went online right now and said that it happened to me, people would say, no wonder. You're such a shit parent. No wonder your
I
kids
don't
left
know if
you.
they would say that. I think I mean, I've got small kids, and I think at some point, everyone, like, no matter how good or bad your life is, whatever, um, whatever problem you have, it doesn't really matter what degree or level that problem is, but to you, that is the most important thing. It could be like low for somebody else or high for another person, but for you, it is the most important thing. And and you have to get through that, whatever that is. And when you do, then that's how you grow. Um,
Yeah.
and I had my parents, my dad alienated me from my mother, so there was that. And it took me to, like, I was 20 something before I figured it out. And then I tried to, reconnect with my mom, but then she got in a relationship with somebody who was controlling, and, then it went away again, and it was weird. Um, I mean, I don't know. You could just got to, every individual has to try to live their best life as best they
Right.
can. and we don't really know. Nobody can really know until we, we learn from our mistakes. I think, if I could
Right.
go back in time, I would do a lot of things different, but
Right.
I can't. So I can just try to be
Just
better
learn
today.
from it. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And
That.
I hope my kids don't disappear from my life one day.
Right.
I'm
Because
hoping the opposite will happen.
Right, that they'll stay, because that's what that my children are demonstrating for their children. They're actually modeling that if you have a difference of opinion, then just separate for good. Because, but that's interesting because I agree that all children have to individuate from their parents, right? There's going to be some point where they separate to be themselves, and. Maybe I still have hope, but on that, my mother alienated me from my dad. That's something I'm learning about too. Like, I didn't really realize what she did to me, but that's actually now a crime.
Yeah, my dad used to tell my sister and I when we were like 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, who are you going to live with when we get a divorce? So when I was 15 years old and my parents got a divorce, that was our default answer already. And you don't, when you're 15, you feel like an adult, but you're not.
No.
It literally took me till I was like 25 or so before I figured it out. What had happened. I didn't have to choose that, but I was forced to choose that. I was manipulated into choosing that.
Right. And it's so damaging for children to have to, because you get that's what was it called? Like, you get a break. It's a break in your consciousness, because you have to split. You can't love both parents because one's bad and one's good. So you have to choose.
When you alienate a parent, you're being forced to pick one.
Yeah, right.
And I don't know. I'm in this situation now where I have to continuously try not to defend myself, because I don't want to further alienate my kids. Even if they're being alienated by their mother towards me, I feel like if I add to it, it's going to be worse. I think hopefully by the time they're 25, they'll figure it out like I did. I mean, that's, and I think pushing might just make it worse. There's books on alienation.
There's a lot of stuff on alienation.
And I think even defending, if the other person's saying bad things about you, I think even defending yourself is, feeding
Fuel.
that alienation. Yeah. And
you can't do anything right. If you show up, you're pushy and controlling. And if you withdraw, you don't love it's so evil. It really is. It's very damaging. I was well aware of parental alienation because I had experienced it. And then when I went through the divorce from the cult guy, I was in this dilemma because I had to warn my daughter that he was a pedophile, because he is a pedophile, but he likes boys. So I felt like she was kind of safe around him physically, but not mentally, because he's also a mind fucker. But also she has boyfriends. And it was really important for her to know that these boys who come around aren't safe around him. So I had to go against what I had learned, and that's that when you're in a divorce, don't involve the kids. Just stay, keep it between the adults, and keep it as peaceful and calm and safe for the children. But I couldn't stay silent on that one.
Yeah, it's I don't think there's ever really a completely right answer. Every situation, every moment in every situation is always, dependent on every other factor. And
right.
I mean, it's tricky. I don't know, for me, I grew up, I needed to talk to a counselor at some point for all the things that I had to talk to them about. And for me, those things were like the big, huge things in my life. For someone else, they might not have been. And I think everyone, no matter how good your parents are, or how bad your parents are going to go through that at some level. I think it's kind of just natural, especially now everybody talks about their feelings, but I don't know. I found out about being in a narcissistic relationship from TikTok, of all things. You know, like I've read about it, narcissistic personality disorder. I've read like did school projects on that stuff, and you know, I knew all of the things, but it wasn't until some guy was just walking there holding his phone talking about, you know, if this is happening to you, this is why, this is, and you know, and I watched that one and I watched like 25 more, and then some point I was like, holy crap. That
Right.
was my life. That really happened, and it's crazy. And these people are just repeating what other people are saying too, but there's something to it, and I think the information we have is useful, but it could also be the opposite. We have access to all of this stuff, and it could be used against you too, with all the fake news, and you never
Right.
know what real news is and things.
It's getting very challenging to be able to discern what's true and who's speaking truthfully. And that's the same as how to be protected from mind control or brainwashing or cults or whatever. And for me, it's staying connected to, I'm going to call it God. I know that's triggering for people, but coming from a militant atheist family where that word was uttered with all the poison as possible, it's been very healing for me to acknowledge that there is a higher power, there is a creator, there is all that is, there is a infinite intelligence. And for me to stay connected to that and connected to my intuition, that helps me discern my way through this maze of chaos and confusion.
Yeah, my 9-year-old was asking me about God the other day, and I was trying to give him my runabout answer, you know, and he's building this 3D puzzle of one inside of it, and he's like got like 4 pieces left, and I can see his eye. I'm like, look, this is the universe, and I'm inside of it, and this is what God looks like, because you know he's the big giant eye outside of it all. And he actually kind of got it. He kind of understood what I was trying to say. I thought it was funny.
I love
Um,
that.
it was weird, but um, so I know we talked about a lot of things. Andrew, do you have any questions or things you want to bring up?
Well, I'm sorry that my mic wasn't working and my audio wasn't working for the like 80%. I was just listening on the second half, but I don't know honestly what I missed because I was like messing with my audio for 50 minutes. So um, I honestly don't know what to say. Other than I do have a video interview with Isabella on my YouTube channel. If anybody else wants to check that out after they're done streaming
So
this.
sweet. Thank you, Andrew.
Yeah. So I did. Andrew, you might need a mic here, mute your mic again. But yeah, I don't know what's going on with the echo there, but I did watch the video that you did with Andrew, and I think you kind of talked through the beginning all the way through the whole scenario of, you know, what it was like to be involved in the group, what it was like to get out of the group. Um, I I guess my curiosity is, what I mean, were you able to, when you got away, were you able to, like, you know, did everything still come with you? All the mind fuckery, as you call it, like, did that come with you? I mean, do you have to, like, every day try to decide what to take away from that was good, that works for you? Or, I mean, how do you get through it after you get out?
I think it's called deconstruction. It seems to be the word that explains what people do once they get out of a cult, because you have to deconstruct the worldview and get the cult leader's voice out of your head. And the big thing is I had to get to know myself. I didn't know who I was. I'd lost touch with, like I said, my intuition. I didn't really know who I was anymore. So the main thing for me, and this is another way of protecting oneself against like brainwashing and all that, it's really important to be as like grounded, literally connected to the earth, and also as strong as possible. I'm not talking about lifting weights, whatever. I'm talking about being connected to the natural world and receiving the energy from the earth, the energy from the sun, from like raw food or just natural foods, to be breathing like pure air. Because here I am in Hawaii, and that's what I did. I had to rebalance my nervous system because I was just shot after grief and all that trauma. So by just going and lying on the earth, nothing else, just lie there and receive, because the earth is like a giant battery that's giving energy. It's also rebalancing us physiologically and electromagnetically and all that. So I spent a lot of time just in nature, whether it was out in the ocean. I did a lot of rage releasing, so, in rage. So that's what, screaming into pillows or in my car with the windows wound up, or even underwater. So processing a lot of those emotions was really important at the start, in addition to researching, because I'd heard the word narcissistic personality disorder, and I knew it applied to this guy because like he thinks he's Jesus. So I continued to do research to understand more about the psychological like traits and my, where I'm at in my brain. So it was a combination of being in nature, doing research, and that over the years, and processing emotions too, over the years, that's helped me free myself from the programming and get to know who I am, what I like doing. And then I've been able to, one of the practices that I do every day that I'd highly recommend, it's one of the most powerful practices that's available to us as human beings, and that's sun gazing. So that's taking the light of the sun as it rises above the horizon or sets. And light is information. Light is it's life optimizing information. If you think about it, that's why we're here, because the light, that's what's growing plants and evolving us as a species, basically. So by receiving that sunlight in my eyes, it has continued to allow my consciousness to expand. It dissolves cognitive dissonance and activates DNA. And I don't know exactly what it does, like you were saying before. There's a lot of things that we don't really understand, but I just know it's how it's affected me, and that's allowed me to take in a lot of information. And then I've been writing. So I've written a couple of books on what I learned after I left the cult, all about natural medicines that are available to us that people think are just too simple to matter, like bare feet on the grass or walking on a beach. These are important practices for us as human beings. There's no way we can be optimally physically or mentally healthy without a direct connection to nature, at least every day, whether that's watching clouds, watching trees wave, watching a butterfly, watching your cat. These are also other practices that are important for us as humans, being creative. And okay, we can be creative through the screens or whatever, but think about cooking or gardening or painting or dancing or making music or whatever. These are important practices for us as human beings to evolve, but also to keep a clear mind and a grounded presence, so that we're not so swayed around by what's going on in the external world, because that's batshit crazy at the moment, by design too.
Yeah. I just want to bring up something they've been mentioning in the chat there. I believe you have a kitten meowing. They're asking about it. And also Molly was asking how old you were when this all began. But if you got your cat handy, they would probably like to see it.
I'll just go and let him in. He just came in. We'll see what he does. And how old was I? I was in my 30s when I met this cult leader. Who he is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they were mentioning. I think I
was hoping that you wouldn't be able to hear him, because I didn't really want to get up.
I think somebody else
mentioned anyway.
A rooster, maybe.
Yeah,
maybe.
We have wild native chickens here on Kauai, and a few of the Hawaiian Islands, actually. Apparently they escaped during a hurricane Iniki, or they were brought over by the Polynesians, who knows. But anyway, they run wild here, and there we have a collection. I know their names, I know their family tree, and I feed them. So that's the chickens that you can hear.
Yeah, they're, I mean, you should be able to see the chat, right? You can see them on the screen there.
I've never even really looked at that. I feel so nervous about
well, on my screen, it's just like right underneath your picture.
Yeah, I can see that, but that's too small for me to read.
Oh, okay. But yeah, they're saying it's a beautiful cat, and he's very handsome and stuff.
He is very handsome. Thank you.
And
so
Tori,
sweet.
she's from Australia.
Yeah, that's a beautiful country. You have beautiful people in your group. Very sweet. Thank you.
One other thing, just to get back to the topic here, one thing I'm kind of curious about is like the vocabulary, the special, like specific vocabulary that is used in these groups. And I mean, I think as an outsider, you would hear these words and it might sound like slang or something, but you don't necessarily know what it means at first. And then it has a dual meaning perhaps or something. I mean, what can you tell me in your experience what that was like, and maybe some examples of it?
Yeah, I wrote an article on it. I called it cult speak, and I think each cult has their own vocabulary. And I'm going to be really stretching to remember exactly what happens, but there were words like processing. I'm processing my emotions, and that's usually someone thrashing around and on the floor and screaming and crying. Looks like demonic possession. But yeah, there were words that everyone used that out to the outsiders it wouldn't have made sense. And I'm sorry that I can't remember more of them. It's been about 18 years now.
Yeah, I understand. I wish I had brought. I mean, I don't know. I've written this big, like, long paper thing on various cults and some of the things that they brought up, and I don't have like a list of it, and it's weird. When I'm thinking about it, I could remember it, but I can't seem to think of anything right now either. I'm trying to see if I could.
It's usually the cult speak. The language is usually what's designed to put the focus back on the individual again. So it's all about, okay, well, what is it in you that's creating this conflict or this problem or whatever? So that's where the cult speak usually ends up being part of the way that we when I was as a cult leader, that I actually would like beat myself up, keep me stuck in that loop of, oh my God, I'm so broken. I really need this guru because I'm such a wounded individual. So that's mostly what the cult speak was about, reinforcing the power of the guru and the neediness and weakness and brokenness of the cult leaders. Cult members.
Yeah, the term processing that you mentioned, I think that's used in another group too. Like the NXIVM processing, like the NXIV. They call it NXIVM, right? The NXIV.
Yeah.
NXIVM. They use that, and with the Love is Real cult. It's written out. Love Israel, like the country. It's what it looks like.
Right.
But each one of them has a name with is real, and they actually pronounce it out, is real. So whenever they're saying love is real, it's almost like a
mantra.
Yeah, exactly. They're like making a claim, and they're saying it all the time, so they're making it become truth as well. And all of the other members had names similar, like Solidarity, and I can't think of any of the other names at the moment. I'm sure they had, they were just names of like emotions and, ways of living and stuff like that. And it came out as a way to, I mean, if you think about it, we use our names daily. We hear our names all the time. We introduce ourselves all the time. But if it's like an affirmation instead, and you're hearing that affirmation as your name all the time, that's got to have some sort of impact on a person.
Right. And also just changing your name, that then is another way to disconnect you from your heritage, your ancestors, yourself. Which, I mean, people do that. I changed my name again to not my birth name either. But when it's changed by someone else, it's very disempowering, very disconnecting.
Yeah, I actually know a couple of friends of mine. They merged their last name, and when they got married, and created a whole new last name. So they both had to change their names. I think that was the first time I've ever heard of that. I thought it was really kind of cute thing that they did, but it's also got to be kind of weird, to re-identify yourself as this other name. Guys, what kind of questions do you have for Bella? I know I've seen a few as we were going through. But yeah, I find cults interesting. And then whenever I read that people who research cults sometimes get sucked into them, I kind of try to step back from it. So, I don't want to research so much that I get pulled in myself. And if you guys ever go to my Substack and check out my research paper, I actually do compare cults to domestic relationships and the same coercive control. And that's like the big topic is coercive control, because when you're controlled that way, you don't necessarily have to hear, somebody nagging you, hey, do this, do this, do this. It's in your head already and you're doing it. That's a scary kind of control.
That's now a crime too in many countries and many states in America. I know there was a test case in Australia just recently where the first guy was convicted of coercive control over his partner, and she spent a lot of time collecting evidence, like of her own as well as the police reports, because it's extremely dangerous. Just like torturing animals when you're a kid or stalking behavior, coercive control is up there on the list of factors that are going to indicate something really bad is going to happen in this relationship. It's really dangerous. You actually put your life in danger. These people they're very, very dangerous if they're trying to. Well, you think about it. Why would you want to do that? Why would you want to control someone's everything? It's very dark. Very demonic.
Yeah, I agree. I think, I guess the control is a selfish action. It's something that you're trying to, I guess you would want to, keep everything the same way, because in that moment, whatever everything looks like, you feel safe and comfort, and then you try to keep it that way. I guess that would probably be the reason why people like the control. My dad was very controlling to my mom. She went to nursing school. She got a nursing degree, and then he wouldn't let her get a job. He was afraid she was cheating on him or something, or she would, well, you got a nursing job, now you're going to come home and get us sick every day, until, she lived 17 years in a house where she had nothing. She had no choices. My dad would put a handful of change on the coffee table, and she could walk down the street to the coffee shop and get a coffee, maybe biscuits and gravy. That was her highlight of the day. That was her life. It was pathetic, and I felt sorry for her, that she had to go through that. And
right.
As I got older, I regretted moving with my dad when they got a divorce. But I think that really messed her up.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely coercive control. And hard for you to witness as a child too, because you can see,
Well, I
how,
think as
what's
child,
going on, you can feel it.
as a child, yeah, you might feel it a little bit, but it's also your normal.
Yeah.
That's what makes it so hard. That just makes it hard as an adult once you realize that your normal wasn't actually normal at all,
Right.
you know? And
I
then
think, oh, sorry, you go.
your whole life shapes off of that normal.
Right. Yeah.
And
Spend your whole life trying to heal from the wounds of childhood, and no one escapes childhood, unscathed.
mm,
That's another important thing to do, is work on healing your wounds from childhood, because if we don't do that, whether it's abandonment, betrayal, lack of love, whatever it is, if we don't heal those wounds, then that's how we go through life, and that makes us vulnerable and susceptible to cults and mind control and being manipulated. So that's something I would advise, that's helped me, is continually to heal from the emotional wounds of childhood.
yeah.
And another thing I just wanted to mention, that one of the things that's a telltale sign of someone with a narcissistic personality disorder, and they will tell you about themselves, and they will make accusations, and that's how they're telling you about themselves. Like if they're what's the word, saying that you're having an affair, if they're accusing you of having an affair, that they are. If they're accusing you of cheating, that they are.
The projecting. Yeah.
Projecting. Yeah, they're masters of that. They will switch things around, and whatever they're blaming you for, that's what they're doing.
Yeah. Molly, were you asking about my sister and my dad in your question? My dad wasn't abusive. He wasn't controlling to my sister the same way he was to my mother, but he was also a pervert, and he was abusing her in other ways that didn't come out until late, after I already moved out of the house. So he had a whole different relationship with my sister that I didn't talk to my dad for. I think when I found out, it was probably like 2002, 2003 maybe, and I didn't. He died in 2011, and I had talked to him maybe 3 times after I found out about that. Um,
I'm
you
sorry,
know,
that's just horrific.
well, the
So
worst part was I have a third. I have 2 sisters, so there was 3 of us. But my youngest sister was 12 years younger than us, and my dad had convinced my sister and I to go out and try to hire an attorney ourselves and get our sister back. At the time we're 14, 15 years old, so like it sounded like a good plan. And then years later, whenever this whole thing broke, and I found out what was actually happening, like he was trying to get my other sister to do the same thing. So I mean, it didn't work out where we got to keep my other sister, and it was devastating to me because I loved my little sister, and but I feel like that it was better. She was better off without my dad in
yeah,
her life, and I don't think my other sister, the one who survived that, has ever been like good. I don't
yeah,
think she ever. I don't think she's married, but I don't know that. I don't know. I worry about her.
yeah.
I don't know that you can recover with stuff like that. But
That's so
people are controlling. There's a lot of warning signs for all of this stuff, and if when I think of like true crime and I'm covering stories, like if I talk about the BTK, I can kind of feel what the BTK's daughter felt when she's like oscillating between, well, they're saying my dad's a killer, but I don't think he is. That you don't want to believe the truth, but then you start looking back, and these little things just start like popping up in your head, and you just know it's 100% true.
right.
And I feel it when I see cases like that. I can feel it because of my
Yeah,
own experience, even though it's much different. My dad wasn't a murderer, but he's still a bad guy. I still had one view of him until this happened. and it changed.
Yeah, that's a challenging time to go through when your worldview gets shattered or broken, to then have to face the truth and then like build another worldview. It takes a while.
Yeah, I think I'm fortunate enough that I understand things enough that I've at least like fixed it in my head where I'm basically okay. But I ended up uh, in a relationship for 12 years where I was basically my ex was like my dad, which is
Right.
bizarre because I'm a male. It should have been the other way, but apparently I didn't become my dad. I became my mom in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Which I
Yeah, the cult leader wasn't my last narcissistic uh, relationship either. It took a number of relationships to finally love myself enough, have boundaries in place to not attract that type of person again. And I know now, because the person I'm with doesn't have a narcissistic personality disorder. And it's so like relieving to be in a relationship with someone who's not trying to compete. Like, not everything that's said is a barb or a competition or a criticism. It's just nice to have conversations again. I hadn't been in that a relationship where there was just like friendly banter for a long time, because a narcissist doesn't, everything that they do or say is intended to like fuck with you in some way to get a reaction. Because this is the thing about why I talk about there's demonic possession, because they love to make people suffer. They love it. They create suffering and then they feed off the reaction. So they bait people, they set people up, and they know what's going to get a rise out of you, and they do that. Whereas human nature, I just know for me, my nature is not to do that. My nature is to be kind and appreciative and or neutral, but
Mhm.
not to go and set about creating conflicts and making people feel like shit.
Yeah, I've been working on this paper on Ted Bundy for a long time, and I won't ever publish it until I actually talk to a neuroscientist who can confirm that what I'm talking about is actually valid, because I don't have a degree in that. And I've definitely read about it, but I'm probably reading like little chunks. I mean, it's a lot what I'm actually reading, but compared to an actual doctor who spent like read thousands of books, I've read like one or two or little passages. But I think what happens with Ted Bundy is that his brain is wired wrong. So if you imagine it like a neighborhood, there's pathways to get to, you go down this street to get to this house, you go down that street to get to that house. So the joy center of his brain is like anything that he does that causes somebody else to suffer goes straight to that joy center of his brain, is what I think. And I think it happens with anybody with the like a sociopath or psychopath. And there's just not, the empathy is there, but there's no pathway to get there. So they don't
Mm-hmm.
feel that same thing. The things that make us feel good is being kind, sharing, that's that's what takes us to that, joy center of the brain. But for him, that pathway is blocked. He
Mm-hmm.
doesn't feel the joy when he does those things. He only feels it when he, you know, I don't know, he would lock people up in his car, his little Volkswagen, and, kill them. That guy, that guy is very scary. But they talk about the dark empathy. It's a kind of a pop culture term. It's not really defined in the DSM manual at all. It's just something that's floating around in like psychology journals. And I think the dark empathy kind of implies an evil version of empathy, and I don't think that's accurate. I think there's still the lack of empathy, but there's a cognitive ability to understand it. um, and I mean, that's just how I kind of see it. But if it is demons, I mean, I guess I don't know if, I mean, I guess possession's a real thing, but um, the DSM, what is it, the DSM 5? It's the diagnostic
Yeah.
manual for all of the psychological disorders. Uh, it covers everything, but the term dark empathy is been popular for the last couple of years, even though
Mhm.
it's not a real term. Um,
Yeah, that's interesting. I haven't heard about that, but I have heard about, because narcissists or people with narcissistic personality disorder usually know that they don't have empathy, and they will watch people and watch videos and even watch films or whatever and watch themselves in the mirror in order to practice the response that would be an empathic response so that they can appear to have that emotion. But they'll spend a lot of time in the mirror, like seeing what their face looks like,
yeah,
make
it's
sure they get it
also,
right.
not everybody who's a psychopath or sociopath who doesn't have empathy actually uses those things for evil things. They don't have to be evil. They might, you know, they might just have to understand those things differently, and they could still understand what makes a good, what's good for people is good for them somehow. I mean, I don't. I guess I'm kind of just thinking out loud here. I don't think it always has to be evil. It could be if they use it for evil, if they're doing it for something selfish. Not every psychopath is a killer or a rapist or a domestic uh, in a
Abuser.
yeah abusive. But I don't know. I guess most of them are,
Yeah,
in
right.
some degree or another. But they don't necessarily have to be. I guess if it benefited them, maybe in some way to be good, they could do it.
Right. Yeah, like at the start of a relationship.
Well, I think that is the definition of the start of a relationship. That's the love bombing phase. That's where you can do no wrong. That's just, I don't know. Maybe I don't know that the person who's doing that to the other person, maybe they don't necessarily realize that that's what they're doing. Um, but I think that is 100% a narcissistic trait for sure.
That's a big question, isn't it? Do they know what they're doing? Like I used to wonder about this guy. When he's like in the dark in his bed, is he aware that he's having to live a lie, and that he has to wake up every day and plot and scheme and continue on with lies and just like try to
There,
try to
yeah,
fulfill his addictions? Is
there's
he?
probably some
I
form
don't
of
know.
self-delusion, where you end up believing the lie
Yeah, right.
yourself. But
Yeah.
I don't know. I know that when I was a kid, my dad wouldn't let my mother watch Lifetime because back when I was a kid, that was all of the abusive wife movies that were out, that were like showing women that they could leave. And my dad wouldn't let her watch those things. And he's
Oh,
like, "You're just going to think every man's abusive and blah, blah, blah." And
oh,
really, he I'm positive that he just didn't want to see himself on, he was doing those things, uh, and he didn't want her to know that she could get away. And
yeah,
so
yeah.
I mean, that's where I'm getting my assumptions from is my own experience with my dad. Um, he would get really mad if she was watching a Lifetime movie, and he was still doing the same thing that they were doing. Like, I don't know if it was always physical, but she couldn't have any friends for sure. He would get mad if she tried to call her parents, but back then there was long distance, so it was expensive a little bit. But She wasn't allowed to go anywhere. She wasn't allowed to have friends, but he would disappear on like New Year's Eve.
Oh,
Those things, like he would go out with his friends, and it definitely
well,
he was like that.
they're masters of hypocrisy and double standards. Rules for thee and not. Oh, just bringing back memories from the cult
Yeah,
for me.
sorry
No
about
worries.
that.
I try to keep them suppressed.
Yeah, so we've been talking for like 2 hours now.
Oh, good on us.
Yeah.
I hope it's been interesting for people.
I think it has. There's a few comments. I don't, you can probably look back at the video later and see some of them if you missed them, but
Yeah,
they are
well,
kind of tiny. But
yeah,
they've been agreeing with you a lot, and but yeah, I don't know what happened to Andrew. I guess he finally gave up, which is unfortunate.
yeah, that is unfortunate.
I like Andrew a lot. He's got a lot of good ideas. I was kind
Yeah,
of hoping.
he's been very supportive of me. I'm very grateful for him. Because it's really the other thing about coming out as a cult survivor is fear of not being believed or being criticized or being judged as being weak-minded. I've had people say to me, "Oh, I would never get in a cult," and would you vote? If you vote, you're in a cult. So people are quick to judge, and I've been very grateful to when that experience hasn't happened, where I've been shown respect and being listened to and all that. It's such an important part of my healing process.
Yeah, I think people can learn from other people's mistakes, and I think that can be helpful for the individual as well. But just I mentioned to you yesterday when we talked briefly, it's like I don't want to say anything that makes you spiral down.
Oh no, you're right. You're right.
But I'm curious, like how the process works, and I think other people are as well, and I think anyone is susceptible to being in a cult, getting, maybe they don't even call it a cult, like you said. It could be just like a weekly
club.
meeting at a house. Yeah, a group
a team.
meeting. Yeah, it could be a lot of things, and I've definitely researched. I've got several names of real doctors, real PhD people who research this, who have gone down the road and joined a cult, because even knowing everything about it, you could still be susceptible to it. It's just I think emotional people always want the warmth,
Right. We want to belong. We want to be part of something.
So that's always there. So if you're in a potentially like bad place in your life, you're even more susceptible to that.
Right.
But I think in general, more people are good than bad, and you can't go through life being afraid. But if you're joining a group that, I don't know that I could ever join a group, and we were talking about dating other narcissists. I have decided that no matter who I ever pick, it's always going to be the wrong person. It's always going to be another narcissist. So I just have decided I can't trust my judgment, and I don't care. I'll be happy by myself. I don't trust. I know that it will seem different. It always does, and it never is. It's just I'm going to always attract that person and be attracted to that person.
But you're not the same person that you were either. Remember that. You're changing.
Well, maybe in 10 years I'll rethink it, but right now, for sure.
Right.
Right now, I don't trust myself enough to risk it.
Yeah, that's interesting. It takes a lot of time to rebuild trust in self. Like I thought, how can I can't trust myself. Look at what I just did, the decisions that I just made. But I had to relearn how to trust myself.
All right. Well, it was great having you on. Is there any, like, before we go, like any advice for people who are interested in looking into something spiritual, but maybe are cautious not to pick the wrong group, or anything at all that.
Yeah, be cautious. Ask questions. Do your homework. And now we can go online and you can immediately find if there's people who are telling a different story from what that particular person is telling about themselves. There's a lot of information available. So do research. Just trust yourself. Know that no one knows you better than yourself, and that the age of the guru is gone. It's now you're the guru. So like lean into that. And yeah, that's my main thing is always and stay connected to the natural world and nature, because that's what keeps us grounded and strong and open-minded and open-hearted.
I guess one last question, and I've already stated that I'm not really, I don't really know if I believe in black magic or not, but how do you protect yourself from those dark forces that, especially if you don't even believe in it? How do you protect yourself?
By
And
staying connected to the natural world, staying grounded, feet on the bare feet on the earth, and just spending time outdoors, receiving the light of the sun. And the way that I stay protected is through sun gazing. So I'm taking in light, because we are light beings. So I amplify my light, I intensify myself as a light being, and I also set the intention and make the statement that anything that is not light and not love has no effect on me, has no way to impact me. I'm protected by light. So I affirm that, I trust that, and I continue to embody light. Whether it's sun gazing, moon gazing, star gazing, candle gazing, fire gazing, taking in the light that shines off water, the glittery light that you sometimes see, or light from a prism. Any way we can take light into our body is making us like impenetrable and invincible to any of the dark forces. They can't get to us. Like, not even like water off duck's back. Like it's even way more powerful than that. They can't even get near us when we're living in integrity, when we're living as good, kind, honest, helpful, like just human beings. When we're not in fear, when we're not confused, when we're not in chaos, because all those other states, when we're angry and fearful and confused, that lowers our vibration, because we are vibratory beings as well. And the lower vibrations is where all the demonic energies exist and feed off. That's why there's so much effort's gone into keeping humanity scared, because that's the energy that feeds them. So if you can keep your vibration either just neutral, even if it's just peaceful, you don't even have to be feeling positive or blissful or ecstatic, but just keep your mood elevated. It's not to say never experience those lower vibratory emotions, because sometimes it's important to go through grief. It's something we all have to journey through. That involves however you process grief, crying, yelling, screaming, whatever. But the point is to move those emotions through so that you can return as quickly as possible to either a neutral or a positive state. And that's how you stay protected.
yeah, I think I could believe that. Yeah. I just know that in my own life, it feels like I got a speeding ticket the other day, before that, like my suitcase on the plane got smashed, things like all these, like, and it's just, I don't think, I always think back to that documentary on The Secret. If I'm putting out positive vibes, then I should get them back. And maybe, I don't know, but I need to.
I think that happens. That's how it works. But also, we're here to learn and grow as souls. So we're not going to grow from like sitting in the tulip patch or the poppy fields or whatever. these challenges come along to help us learn and grow.
That is true. Tori says, keep shining bright like a diamond. And I guess that.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah, like listening to high vibrational music, that's a protection from dark forces. Eating high vibrational foods, drinking pure water. There's a lot of ways that we can stay protected. And it's really important to be protected, especially like you, Robert, or Andrew, with the work that you do, because you're going into some pretty dark places with some pretty dark energies that do want to like fuck with us. So it's good to stay positive and shining bright like a diamond.
Yeah, I've definitely been on like I don't know, I've been writing funny kid stories for the last like 3 or 4 months. And I haven't like specifically taken a break from true crime, but I'm also not working on it as heavily, you know, because I think I think there's some, sometimes you just have to kind of take a break. And I know
you do.
We all like true crime is one of the like highest rated information that people consume like everywhere. And that's, but at the same time, I don't think they, like at least on my channel, I see like people come and go. They like come for a long period and then they stop for a long period and they come back. And I think a normal person, you know, tries to get other things besides just the bad stuff. And the last 2 or 3 years that I've been doing this, like all I do is research the scary stuff. It didn't bother me the first year. It kind of started bothering me the second year. I think right now I'm finally realizing that I got to be careful.
Yeah, you do have to be careful.
It just wears you out.
Oh my God, there's so many crazy people, such horrible things going on. And it is fascinating, but it's we do need a break. We do need to not be immersed in that dark world.
Well, Bella, thank you for joining me today. Sorry, Andrew couldn't kind of hang out too, but anytime you want to reach out, just let me know. Like, and if you want to talk about other things,
thank you.
You're more than welcome to come back on anytime.
Thank you so much. And I'm sorry that I couldn't read the chat. I would have loved to engage more with your wonderful audience, but it's a little bit small for me to read. And I'm really grateful to Andrew too for connecting us. And yeah, I'm sending all my love and light and aloha here from the beautiful island of Kauai.
All right.
And thank you for the work. I just want to say thank you for the work that you're doing too, to give platforms to people to speak, to also present information that challenges people's like mindsets and open people to more of what's going on in the world and more of reality too. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. I'm glad you were, you know, it was great meeting you. I'm glad you were able to spend some time here on Timeless Mysteries. And guys, thanks for hanging out. As always, stay kind, be vigilant, and always question the truth. I'll catch you in the next video.